Howdy doody, buckaroonies, and welcome back to another episode of Morning Coffee with Cameron. 2021 is almost over, which is weird. It feels like this year just sort of happened and forgot to tell anyone about it because it went by really quick. This year, I got to release a new EP I'm so excited about, and I've got some new music on the way hopefully next year because the majority of this year I was really busy working with a lot of super cool companies on some really awesome sound design projects and whatnot. We moved to a new house, I got to build this new studio, we hit over 75,000 subscribers on this channel, which is just nuts, and overall I feel like it was a pretty damn good year, but I suppose just about anything was better than 2020. With the year winding down to a close, it is time for my yearly plugin recap video of my favorite free and paid plugins of 2021. Much like my recap video last year, these aren't plugins that were exclusively released in 2021, but rather plugins I feel like I got the most mileage out of this year. Now, for the sake of eliminating any redundancy, because I use a lot of the same stuff, I've eliminated anything in this list that I covered in my recap video last year, so if you want to check out some of my other favorite free and paid plugins, you can check that out with the little pop-up box up here. Of course, if you've got some plugins you really love this year that aren't mentioned in this video, feel free to drop those down in the comments below. With that, let's dive in and check out some of my top plugins of 2021. Kicking things off this year, we have Pianoteq from Modartt, which is a physical modeling synthesizer that uses the power of math and science and stuff to give you the sounds of pianos, keyboards, and a variety of other instruments with no samples used whatsoever. It's all mathematically constructed, and that's just really cool. Pianoteq goes beyond just pianos and keyboards, and there are a pretty good amount of instruments available for it, and what really makes it unique is how deep you can dive in to adjust the guts and inner workings of just about any parameter, and most of it can even be MIDI controlled, which is just mind-numbingly powerful. Now, Pianoteq isn't the only piano physical modeling synth out there, but I think it's truly in a league of its own and represents the best of what physical modeling has to offer. Next up is a really cool reverb and delay from my friends at Baby Audio. That is Spaced Out. Spaced Out is a multi-mode delay and reverb unit. There are a couple different flavors of each of the algorithms, and within them there are some effects you can add on that sound pretty interesting, like phasers and flangers and whatnot. Now, Spaced Out is good in the mix, but I think it really shines when you just wash everything out and enjoy the lusciously delicious, amazing ambient epicness that it's capable of. Spaced Out is a really cool plugin because it combines something that sounds amazing with some pretty easy to understand controls, so it's not too deep, and I don't feel like you really have to sit there tweaking it. You can kind of just throw some settings together and it's going to sound pretty good no matter what. Another plugin I found myself using a whole lot this year is Smooth Operator, also from Baby Audio, and that's for one very specific reason: spectral sidechaining. Smooth Operator is super easy to use. You can just control the overall level. You can dial it in on a couple specific spots if there's something you want to adjust. But what really made it useful for me this year was the ability to use the sidechain input. What's cool about this is it listens to the spectral content of whatever's going into the sidechain and then removes that from whatever you've applied it to. So it's really great to duck the bass out of the way of certain things, or make room for the vocals in the mix, or anything like that where you just need to make something a bit more clear. Next up, Synapse Audio's Dune 3. This is a plugin I actually used quite a bit previously, and for whatever reason last year, I just didn't find myself using it all that much. I think just kind of like other things, sometimes you go through phases in life, and for whatever reason, this plugin kind of sat on a shelf for most of 2020 for me. Dune 3 is an insanely powerful synthesizer. Not only can you have 8 layers inside of a single patch, but you've got a really solid effects selection, a very open and detailed mod matrix, and a whole lot of other stuff going on under the hood. But I think what really makes it stand out is the filter section. Dune 3 has a ton of different filter types available, and it's got 2 filters inside of the synth. These are some of my favorite filters I've heard in any synth plugin, and I think are the only filters that come pretty damn close to some of my favorite hardware synths with analog filters in them. Overall, Dune 3 is an absolute workhorse once you learn your way around it, and I think it's really worth checking out. Next up is a little bit of an underdog. That is Cypher 2 from FXpansion. This is a synth I got a while ago, and I used it for a bit, and then kind of like Dune 3, it sort of sat on a shelf and I kind of forgot I had it. Cypher 2 is a synthesizer built with modulation and expression in mind, and it makes it really easy to make some very detailed and intricate patches with lots of movement and modulation and expression happening because it's all laid out more or less on a single screen. Cypher 2 has a really high quality factory preset library. It also supports MPE, making it ideal for some very deep expression, and it's probably the synth I use the most on my EP Continuum that I released this year because it just sounds amazing. Cypher 2 is a little bit of an oddball, and it does take a little bit of work to understand how it operates and everything that it can do, but once you do figure it out and get around that learning curve, there's not a lot out there like it. Next up is Devious Machine's Infiltrator. This is just one of my favorite plugins of this year and one of my favorite plugins in general. I was looking for a new glitching tool, but I couldn't really find anything that sort of fit the bill of what I was looking for. Then Devious Machines got in touch with me about Infiltrator, had me work on some of the factory presets for it, and I was just thrilled. This was like, if I could have built a plugin for glitching and mangling stuff, this is almost exactly what I would have done. Infiltrator has a ton of different effects available and a very detailed modulation system that you can go in and make all sorts of crazy stuff with. What really makes it special though is the sequencer page, where you can go in and sequence all of these effects and make some insanely complicated and detailed sounds without a whole lot of work. Although Infiltrator was designed with audio mangling and destruction in mind, it does work well for some more subtle applications with some really high quality filters and other effects built in if you want to do some like sequence filter things or just add a nice reverb or some compression into a mix. It's a really cool plugin and you should go check it out, especially if you're into glitchy, weird stuff. Dawsome's Abyss is just kind of a cheat code for ambient music and epic pad stuff. Abyss is a spectral synthesizer that is very unique, and I like how weird the interface is because it removes a lot of the conventional ways you might approach making a patch and is a synthesizer sort of based around discovery. Abyss works by selecting any number of points of additive spectral content and adding them to a gradient. From there, you can modulate the position of the playhead on the gradient and morph between these areas of spectral content for some very interesting and unique and sort of unconventional and really weird results. Abyss is capable of a huge variety of sounds, everything from dusty, grumbling, noisy cinematic drone textures to hyper clean, modern, cutting, spectral additive pads and a lot of range in between, even in a single patch. If you're at all into composing or soundtrack work, or you need something to create ambient drones and sound beds, or you like to create ambient music, Abyss is a plugin you should absolutely own. Next up is Unfiltered Audio's Silo. This is a granular audio mangling plugin that is really interesting. It's one of my favorite plugins for creating ambient granular textures, and it's a really good sound design utility for creating glitchy drums and one-shots, or just throwing audio into it, randomizing some stuff, and seeing what comes out the other end. What makes Silo unique compared to some other granular plugins out there is just the fact that it's designed by Unfiltered Audio. They give you access to some very interesting parameters that aren't typically available, and they add some kind of fun and clever twists on the world of granular effects. Beyond that, they give you a lot of very detailed fine-tuning control to absolutely nail down every aspect of granular stuff that you want to do to a sound. Obviously, I'm very into ambient music and I'm very into sound design, so silo is kind of one of my meat and potato things that's just in my tool belt whenever I'm working in a session. If you're into granular destruction, ambient music, or just want something to throw stuff through and see what happens, Silo is definitely a plugin worth checking out. Next up is Rift from Minimal Audio. This was a very interesting plugin release, and I first heard about Minimal Audio with their free Rift filter, but Rift is the bigger, fuller, badder version, and it is a very cool distortion slash delay slash audio destruction plugin. Rift has a whole lot of horsepower under the hood, with the basic panel being very easy to operate. It's got a lot of really cool presets, but if you flip into the guts, you can do a whole lot inside this plugin, including creating very interesting sequenced modulated distortion and feedback effects. You can create some crazy wild textures, and you can absolutely shred audio to a million pieces, and it sounds really good doing it. Similar to something like Infiltrator, Rift is a great plugin for shredding and destroying audio, but it's also really useful for more subtle applications like just a bit of soft clipping or some sequenced filter movements. It's a pretty cool plugin, and it's a very interesting company, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with next. Capping things off is Stochas from the Surge Synth team. Now, this plugin hasn't been something I've used all that much lately because of the recent Bitwig update, which essentially removes the need for me to use this plugin. However, it is a really cool sequencer plugin that you should check out. I find it really useful for things like drums or just for changing up some patterns and melodies in a track to find some new ideas. Stochas is a MIDI processing plugin based around the idea of probability. You can chain different note occurrences together, you can control probability of each individual note, and you can do this either in monophonic or polyphonic modes, meaning you can feed a loop through it and let Stochas run it back a couple of times and find a lot of different iterations on something very quickly. Stochas is absolutely free, and it's maintained by the fine folks over at the Surge Synth team. I know they're working on some updates for it. I don't really have any news as to what that is exactly, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing where they take this plugin in the next update. And so I think that wraps up my year in plugins. If you have some plugins you really enjoyed this year that weren't mentioned in this list, feel free to share them down in the comments below. And of course, if you made something you're really proud of this year, whether it was a new album, a new track, or sample pack, or whatever, feel free to drop that down in the comments as well, because I'm always really excited to see what you're out there creating. I think that wraps things up for this video, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your year, and as always, I hope this inspires you to get out there and make something awesome.